24th, 2023, executive session, and this will be a vote for release. So looking for a motion for vote for release. Motion by Michael, second by Matt, and then all in favor, and that is unanimous. Then our second set of minutes are from March 7th, 2024, and these are the regular session minutes for approval. So looking for a motion to approve those. Motion by John, second by Robin, and then all in favor, and that is unanimous. Oh, sorry. And then Michael Agajanian abstention. Excellent. Next agenda item will be announcements, correspondence, and distributions. Any committee members? Yes, Megan?
I had a couple, so I just wanted to share that the districts, both band and string, had their vertical concerts this week, so featuring our young musicians through our seniors. I was only able to make the band concert, but the performance was just tremendous. I think we actually have the top-ranked tenor sax in the state, so just wanted to give a huge shout-out to our musicians who did an amazing performance. I also wanted to share that Shining Star Preschool is going to have its Invention Convention on April 2nd and 3rd, and this year's theme is Imagine It, Make It, and they always have incredible creations, so highly recommend folks stopping by that. And then I just wanted to share with the committee, Matt and I did, as you may recall, we were all invited to participate in the Multilingual Parent Advisory Council meeting, which was actually took place last night. And there were over 60 parents in attendance. Matt, Kevin, and I attended on behalf of the school committee. And they also had more than 30 children there who spent their time coloring, doing puzzles, and completing some impromptu math. So it was pretty impressive working with our child care staff. The MPAC steering committee had pre-planned some questions that were addressed to us relating to transportation, inclement weather policies, safety, as well as drug use. We also shared with them the new bus program that's being piloted, which was definitely of interest to the families that attended. We encouraged them really to share their concerns, certainly with building administration, their teachers, with Kevin, and then also definitely with this committee as they raise concerns. There was an opportunity for those present to ask questions, so I'll let Matt hit on that.
Sure, yeah, just to start, I would say that I was blown away, number one, that many people could fit into this room. Mm-hmm. And it got really hot in here, but it was really great to see a community that we don't hear from a lot show up to be involved. A lot of the questions that came to us from the families were related to safety and feelings of safety. There was multiple discussions about, or I should say questions around the use of metal detectors and whether or not that's appropriate in our schools, how we can go above and beyond on trying to prevent drugs from coming into the schools, especially given that drugs in today's world are everything from snacks to what we grew up seeing when we were younger. So I think Dr. McIntyre did a good job of explaining where we are with our safety and why we do things the way we do, but safety for their kids was a primary concern, and I think that may be something that gets carried forward in future discussions now, with not just with this group, but potentially if we can get some of their representatives from the MPAC to come to our meetings here and see what we're all about and present to the full board on their feelings and their takeaways. But I think that it was a really good first step with Megan and I to just get this committee involved in their community and try to bridge the gap that I think that we all know has been there. And I think we can keep that conversation going. It's going to get even better as we get more and more of those parents involved every day. So I think it was well worth our time, and I look forward to any one of us getting an opportunity to go back and discuss things with them again.
It was a really great discussion. I would just add, we spend a lot of time in meetings. Every individual who got up to spoke, the first thing that they did was thank us. And I was just kind of blown away. Like, it was really our first interaction and an opportunity to communicate, and I was just really impressed. Their next meeting is Wednesday, May 15th, and that will be to introduce our dual language programming. So if anyone's interested, just reach out to Jennifer Norjanian or Julia and FRC to let them know we wanted to attend. It was translated in English, Spanish, and Portuguese, and it was definitely time well spent.
If I could add just one thing, I think a couple things. One is, I think the group got the message that their voice is important and we're there for them, which I think is critical. But two, I think just to reiterate, like, this room was packed to the brim. I mean, we kept grabbing chairs from the other rooms, and I think there's a lot of interest and enthusiasm from this particular group about what's happening in the Milford Public Schools, and the more we can kind of support those voices, I think the better.
Thank you very much, Megan.
Sure.
We appreciate that. Any other committee members? Yep, John?
No, I just want to thank you both for the update because, safety is probably the number one concern I've been hearing in recent years. And it's great to hear the good work that we're starting to bridge with that. Not starting, but we're just addressing it deeper, I guess. But, I keep hearing safety, that these are the concerns from, the everyday parent, and I understand it. So thank you for doing that.
I guess looking ahead on that, does that become a topic that we're looking to discuss more and try to promote what we're doing for safety aspects overall?
There was a specific lengthy discussion, I would say, around multiple concerns around metal detectors, Chris, and so I think it would be worthwhile for us in the future to talk about the pros and cons of a program specifically like that. And I think continuing to publicize what we have in place is really valuable. If you want to elaborate on that, Matt.
Yeah, no, I think that's right in line with what I was thinking too. I mean, I think potentially down the road, maybe we can advertise this a little more to them. Maybe we can get one of our school resource officers to kind of come and help discuss what they do. And I shared last night that I know that the police department was looking at potentially adding some more SROs in their budget. Whether or not that gets through, I don't know. But potentially having them come either here or to another meeting with MPAC to give a little more of an in-depth on what we do for safety and security and what the plans are will help that discussion. Obviously, we would want input from MPD on any additional features of safety we may add.
And if I can add to that, so the previous meeting, we had our two middle school and high school principals, our school resource officer, myself, and I know I'm leaving somebody out, but having that very discussion, the focus of the first discussion was completely on safety with that group, and I think, we didn't have as broad of a audience participation in that one, but I think it's the concern came up in that one, and it came up in the second meeting, for sure.
John?
Yeah, in addition to the school resource officers, I definitely want to include Chief Tazino in that. I mean, it all starts at the top, and
Right.
he's got a lot of things that he's working towards right now, and he's accomplished already. But I think it with safety, I mean, he's our number one resource at this point.
Definitely. So, sounds good. So it sounds like more conversation. Yeah. Brendan?
I mean, I would encourage all public safety departments to be involved too, not just the police department. I mean, we had the issue with the cafeteria tables not being up to code. We had the issue with fire exits being out. I mean, it's not just police. There's other safety issues that should be brought to the table for parents to be aware of and for other departments to take ownership of. So I would encourage all safety departments to be involved.
Okay. Add it to the list, definitely. Anything else on correspondence? Michael?
Yeah, so my wife's a coach of academic decathlon, which is a group of students in the high school who get together, they compete, it's a national organization, and the Milford High School team is actually going to nationals. So they've beat out, schools like Weston and whatnot, and so they, I think, placed 4th in the state. So that's a really big deal for our school. I know people ask, do our students, how well they perform, and well, we're beating out almost a lot of the schools in Massachusetts who compete. So they're going to nationals. I'll give an update after that happens.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Administration, any correspondence, distributions?
Oh, I think Craig's
There,
going.
but, yep, go ahead.
We have some art.
Excellent.
This is from Ms. Grondin's art class. I believe that is perspective art. But you see the fine art that our middle school students have done. Really quite impressive.
Great. Thank you for noting that. Appreciate it. All right. Very good. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate the updates. Moving on to invitation to speak. Anybody here? Invitation to speak. Not seeing anybody. So I'm going to pass over the chairperson update and move that to the end. So we will move right into our transportation department review. Mr. Legore, come on up and join us.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me. Would you like just a general update on where we are at the moment? Or I know I've had some offline conversations.
Yeah, sorry, Jim. I think I partially requested, I think we're in the middle of a tight budget season and trying to ensure that we land in the best place possible. And as we think about needs and increasing needs and costs that seem to continue to only go in one direction, transportation just seems to continue to come up. So we felt like in conjunction with us trying to finalize the budget for next year, it'd be a great opportunity to hear from you what's happening in the district, local, non-local, kind of all that you're managing, and just maybe food for thought for us as we're really thinking about the budget. What factors should be top of mind?
No, absolutely. So, I mean, obviously, it's a moving target, so it's not anything that's going to be granular or finite. From a top level, our in-district numbers have grown significantly. I know we've had some offline conversations. Just to give you some historical data points, in 2019 and 20, we were in the 40s for in-town local sped. 2023-24, we have 102 local sped students. Those students are spread across our MPS-owned vehicles, and that is our driver base that facilitates those. One of the main challenges we continue to see, obviously, is we embrace a shifting dynamic in town. I know it's probably not a surprise to a lot of people that we've seen some additional high-need students come into the district. One of the big outliers that has come online recently is the Best Western's conversion to a shelter, giving us 60 families and roughly 240 individuals, estimating anywhere between 140 and 160 students to the impact to the district. Now, a lot of that is facilitated through yellow busing. So we do have many yellow buses that go there for pickup, but it does also yield out a level of IEP and a level of specialized transportation. With that being said, out-of-district transportation for non-local sped does stay relatively consistent. Over the last couple of years, it has risen slightly, but it does tend to drop off. I think at this point, the largest increase we've seen is 2021-22 at about 71 students, dropping down to about 57 students in 23-24. The outlier in that category usually tends to be our third-party contracted providers. Post-COVID, we've seen a lot of suppliers go offline, individual cost increases, and usually capacity is absorbed rather quickly. We do have a number of cost-saving activities to facilitate, usually at the beginning of the year when we have the bulk of our students. But I will say that those opportunities do dwindle during the year as other districts also vie for the same opportunities. So you can see cost increases throughout the year as capacity becomes limited and demand remains high, as large regional carriers such as Vanpool end up divesting their routes to smaller, more local carriers who can or cannot facilitate. So those tend to be our main challenges. I mean, labor continues to be an issue. I think it's not a secret that these roles are generally an aging population, not only for us but also our main contractor Vendetti, who also has difficulty sourcing and retaining labor. We do offer a very good comprehensive package. So for anybody looking for a reasonable rate, for a part-time position, we do offer a lot. Unfortunately, after we've had continued outreach and not had a ton of success, although I will say that we have added a couple of drivers through attrition from our crossing guards, unfortunately, over into 7D providers or a 7D license. So I think that's, from an overview for a start, our main challenges really continue to be our in-town local transportation. And I will say, just to kind of close the circle on that, is that it does reduce our opportunities to look for cost-saving opportunities with our own MPS-owned vehicles because we're absorbing capacity in town, so we're unable to utilize those vehicles to reduce costs out of district. If our out-of-district numbers continue to rise, we'll have to rely almost entirely on third-party contractors to be able to facilitate that additional volume.
Can you talk a little bit about the utilization? Sorry, Chris.
No, please go ahead.
About
No,
the
you're good.
utilization of our own vehicles, both buses and vans.
With 102 kids provided for services in town, we only have a limited amount of seats. I mean, it's not a finite. People do go on and off the vehicle.
Sure.
But the numbers have increased significantly, leaving very few empty seats for us to utilize those vehicles out of district. Again, with the increased population and diversity in town, our IEP numbers usually end up, allowing students to have specialized transportation. We have to provide that transportation based on the capacity that we have because we do not contract out any local sped numbers.
So out of the 102, Jim, maybe just delve into that a little bit, right? Like, how many are going on a bus with other kids? How many in a van by themselves? Approximately. I don't expect you to have specifics, but do you have any sense of?
No, I wouldn't even be able to take a stab at that. I mean,
Okay.
the 7D vans that we have allow us to generally, based on, you have to remember too, these are multi-tiered routes. So a lot of them have high school routes, middle school routes, and elementary routes. We're limited in capacity on elementary routes because of car seats, et cetera. But the vans are usually maxed out at about 5, potentially 6
Okay.
students per shift. And then the vans, the buses are generally like a variable. Like, for example, bus 26 with Roberta is a high needs, medically fragile bus that's capped out at about, 15, 18 students. Of course, you also have to make way for wheelchairs, as our wheelchair population has increased as well.
Do we have multiple buses that are wheelchair accessible currently? I know
We do,
3
we
is-
have 2.
Okay.
Yeah. But when you take a bus like bus 28 with Matt, it goes to Brookside, has close to 70 kids on his bus.
Wow.
So it's not an exact science, and it's kind of a moving target. And if the student fits a profile that we can put on a non-medically fragile or monitored bus, then we'll do that. If we can't, we have to take the student's needs into consideration first
Sure.
when placing the student.
And how many of the buses that we own are doing morning and
All of
afternoon
them.
routes every day?
Yeah, including 26, which does a midday. And we have multiple modified days as well. So we have drivers that go out and do a 9:20, an 11:20, a 1:20, and then morning and afternoon routes, plus Shining Star middays.
Got it. Okay.
Michael, you got a question?
I think you said it, but I'm gonna ask you again. So how many buses do we have it, or how many seats total? So
Well, the seats are difficult to calculate because of the grade levels. If you
but like
went,
like in the buses, so if there's 10 buses and 10 seats each, that's 100.
well, we
seats.
have, so 24 is the 16 I think it's considered a 24 passenger when you remove the seats. Goes down to about 15. 26, I think, is considered a 47 passenger. When you remove the seats, goes to about 20.
And you're
20
removing the seats to make accessibility.
Wheelchairs,
Yeah.
yeah. 25 is a 71, 28 is a 71, 29 is a 71, 30 is a 71. But again, it depends what you're doing. If you're using that trip on an athletic trip for high school, it's 2 to a seat. If you're doing that for a field trip to the zoo for Woodland, it's 3 to a seat.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious the sense of how many buses we own and just roughly how many seats there are.
Yeah.
When you mentioned
fair.
that we're coming close to capacity, I was just kind of curious. At like peak,
Yep.
what is utilization?
I mean, buses are fairly utilized. The buses are mostly utilized at the middle school level and down fully all the time. So we really have, like even today, we had a student that was just coming off a modified day, going back to a standard release, and we struggled to find capacity for the student. Not capacity to go home, but which bus are we going to put him on, because we don't have a lot of available capacity.
So is it because we don't have enough buses or we don't have enough labor?
It's mostly seating capacity, and then obviously labor is tied to the seating capacity.
Thank you.
And I can say we've posted multiple times in multiple locations for 7D and what's the big bus driver? What's that? CDL.
CDL.
7D and CDL licenses, and we just don't. We just don't. Every once in a while we get an applicant. As soon as we do, we're jumping on them to see what we can do. And this is a universal issue. It's every district is struggling with. The out of district transportation. In-district special ed transportation, just the general bus transportation. It's every superintendent I speak with, that's one of the, top 3 issues that they're working on. So it's across the board, and, there's a lot of theories on why, but it's become much more of like a critical issue kind of post-COVID. And I think a lot of people didn't come back. I think there's been a lot more folks that were bus drivers that have moved to places like Amazon and other companies that do delivery. We've just lost the labor force.
One of the things that I'd like to, sorry, Matt, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
One of the things I'd like to explore, and I think we talked about it during our last update where community use was in, and we talked about both. I'm not sure what the appetite is for it at this point. Maybe it's something we could do next year. I know Chapter 70, is creating agita for everybody, to say the least. But I was thinking about potentially getting another 47-passenger bus so that we can increase our capacity in town by moving some of the 70 runs into a large vehicle, and then reutilizing and redeploying those 70 vehicles out of district to try to drive some cost savings by combining some out of district routes with our own vehicles. I don't know if there's budget room for that, probably not this year, but I was thinking next year, it might be something we might want to talk to free up capacity out of district. So, not a point for discussion, just wanted to throw that out there, that we are trying to look for ways to mitigate cost.
Quick question going back to the advertising. I guess, what are we doing for advertising out there, you know?
So
First question,
as
yeah.
simple as like sending it out in my email blast, to
Right.
going on Indeed, to going on, you know, School Spring, to going to career fairs and saying, hey, we're
Yeah.
looking for drivers.
It's awesome.
You know, if anybody has creative ideas of, you know, or they know where drivers are congregating, I'm happy to go down there personally and have conversations with people.
Right.
I'm so open to ideas that people have.
Yeah, so I was just kind of curious where, you know, is the standard bus driver not on typical social media where we're advertising or scanning through Indeed? So I don't have the answer to that. I'm just kind of curious on where are we trying to post and where maybe are better ideas.
Yeah, and
of
we've even
trying
done
to
some
post.
local fairs, just because
Yeah.
sometimes we have local people.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
because the challenging thing is the schedule piece too, because, you know, you've got someone who's available in the morning for a couple hours, someone who's available in the afternoon for a couple hours, which, you know, it's not like that typical 8-hour shift that you get, like, you know,
Right.
working for like a private company and driving.
It's like,
Good.
yeah, it's simple. Didn't we talk about the last year or two about buying more buses, and either we did or didn't? I can't remember.
Well, I was kind of gonna do a follow-up question to
Right.
that. So the assessment, in my opinion, needs to start with, two things. One, if, we could receive, almost a comparison, so an FY '23 to an FY '24, no names are needed, but, the 102 students that are being, transported locally, if we could see what building, the grade, and the number of students for each one of those buildings for the 102.
Yep.
And then I'd like to see it compared to FY '23 to do an analysis of where the growth is happening by each school.
Which school, which just, yeah.
Okay, and then on top of that, that would be able to tell us, you know, how we could manage better a 47 passenger, which of course, the budget impact would be neutral, because whatever we can save at a $300 a day, third-party vendor would more than cover the cost of the, 47 passenger. But I would wanna have concrete analysis that we could make up a plan for those 102 students versus, what did you say it was, Jim, in 2023? How many?
In 2023, it
that?
was like
74.
74, something like that.
Right,
Yeah.
and maybe even some criteria, from the team chairs as to what makes a student eligible for a van versus a yellow bus. What's the kind of the assessment there?
And can I just piggyback on that too, is that there's a time piece involved in this too, because, you know, some of our students with special needs, it takes a little bit longer for them to get on a bus than, you know, students at, like, you know, the big yellow bus stops, and that's a consideration too, because, you know, it's always something I'm fighting is, you know, getting on
I
time
mean,
and getting-
two good, I mean, Kathy raises a lot of good points, so I have that data, so we can pair that out, and I can put some comparative charts together and share it with the team.
Be helpful.
And I think, you on the 47 passenger bus, or?
Nope. Oh wait.
Yeah, the one other thing to caution on bus purchases is just as we expand our fleet, there are implications from the insurance side of it. So the town hall basically kind of made us aware of that. So if we increase our ridership, there are implications from the insurance side that town hall will have to pick up. So we got to be careful with that, to make sure. John, if you have more to add to that.
No, I was
part of it.
gonna make that same point, so I'm
Yeah.
just glad you brought it up.
Yeah, so again, it sounds great to be able to add to the fleet, but there are other costs, implications of just the bus and the fuel and the driver. Is the insurance
Yeah.
side of it too.
I was gonna mention that as well. I mean, I hate to say that, but that wasn't I had a follow-on discussion
Yeah.
with Brian a couple weeks
Yeah.
ago with the potential impact to the liability
It sounds
claim
like it's
fund.
a significant cost impact.
Yeah, I just think it definitely kind of warrants an offline discussion. I actually suggested that maybe, you know, we could get together again, because he's very vocal about it.
Right, that's why,
So.
yeah. he seemed
Not gonna
very-
speak for
he
him,
seemed
but he
very
definitely,
concerned.
he
That's
definitely
all,
seemed
so,
concerned.
Yeah.
Yeah, no question.
Matt?
Well, I think that those are good points. I think the analysis has to happen. I think that you need to figure out
Sure.
that number, because I'm going to bring up my favorite, most annoying point I've made in 3 years, which is we're 566,000 behind on transportation again. So, yeah, that's a hefty expense, but so is 566,000 over budget again. So what I wanted to talk to you, though, is about the homeless population part that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Looking at the sheet that you sent out, I think it was to Megan, and just that section alone was 276,000 over budget, which I understand because we had that big influx show up. But how many students did you say were being picked up from the converted homeless shelter? This looks like it says 32, but I thought you said
I think it is
a
30.
much
I think
higher
that was-
number.
I think it is 30 for
Yeah.
that,
Okay.
actually.
And they're all in the same place?
Well, right now they're at the Best Western.
They're
yeah.
so they're all
Yeah.
at the Best Western.
But they're
So-
potentially going different places, though, that's the issue.
It
Well,
is, and
I
I
know
don't,
that
I don't want to
that's
give the
being
misnomer either that all the homeless are just at the
No,
Best
no, I know
Western,
there's
'cause-
more
so
than one
it's the homeless population obviously is spread.
Sure.
And so one example, and I think I shared it with Meg, and obviously we're not going to use any names, but we had a student that was in a shelter here in Milford and on Oliver Street, which obviously was no cost to the district because bus 26 or 24 would pick them up.
I would be broad, just be a little broader in your.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So, we had a student here in Milford,
town.
and then they moved to
On the
Medway,
bus route, yeah.
and then they moved twice in Worcester. So each one of those examples requires a new out-of-district third-party contractor provider to bring them back. So and so you never know when you're going
And
to
that's
get
where the
those.
shift comes in,
Yeah.
too. Okay.
And you never know when you're going to get. So that was a single student with 3 additional points of contact, which all required an additional invoice and additional PO at a different daily rate.
Okay.
I guess, and to Matt's point, when we look at those cost adders, it's this out-of-district, out-of-town service, bus service, that's really impacting the budget.
I'm sorry, could you say that again,
It's-
Chris?
So it's the out-of-district, out-of-town.
Well, it's the yes.
That's
So
that's the most significant impact to the budget.
that is a
currently?
significant. Yes, that's what I would consider that to be. Out of district, or what we would call non-local,
Yeah.
is the biggest impact. And Kathy had mentioned at one
Yeah.
point that like we used to use our vans
Right.
to offset the cost
Yes.
of that, and now we rely more on third-party contractors because our vans are being reutilized or deployed in district.
In district, okay.
And so that goes back to the analysis task.
Right.
I think the only thing that I'm trying to understand based on what you just said is like this sheet showing, I assume when you're saying in district with the vans, you're referring to the SPED local transportation line?
Sped local, yeah.
That's showing that we've actually spent, unless this is a typo, $1,200 this year.
No, it's gonna be sorry.
I'm looking down here.
Yeah,
So that's not,
that's not accurate.
okay. Then I don't have
But so
more
it's,
so
but
tripping.
and it's
But
a
it
general,
makes
and again
sense.
too, like I preface with Meg that some of these, the numbers are really kind of generalized because
Sure, sure.
it's not finite and it's a moving target, but.
Well, I think that makes more sense though in terms of trying to understand the overages, because if they were all in town, I'm struggling to figure out how it costs $276,000 to get kids to move
Yeah.
3/4 of a mile.
Yeah.
But if
Right.
you're going all over central Massachusetts to take care of these students, that adds up fast. So that makes a lot more sense.
And again, like if you want to have an offline discussion,
Yeah.
we can do that. I mean, if I don't know how available that is, but I'm happy to share some more of the finite reporting that we have.
Okay, thank you. Rob?
I actually had a few questions, but I think they're all pretty simple. So just thinking about trying to find drivers, I guess one question I had was for the students who are out of district. Is it advantageous from like a cost perspective to offer to pay the parents the transportation fee to drive their students themselves to out of district placements?
Well, I'll leave that up to, that's not my call.
We have done that in special circumstances,
Yeah.
usually student driven,
Okay.
not to make it.
No pun intended.
Yeah, no pun, but, so that, and it is in some ways much cheaper.
Yeah, I just didn't know if making that an offer, because I don't know. I don't want to speak for anyone else, but it's just, I've heard of situations where it's happened before, so that's why I was curious about that. And then I didn't know if this would even be a catch, but have we considered offering any type of help for people who need to get their CDL license, who might not have it? Is that something we have done, or would?
We
Yeah.
do actually, so
Okay.
the district does pay for the CDL and the
Okay.
7D fully.
Okay. So, That sounds good. And then I guess my only other questions, we're just looking at this spreadsheet. So if I'm understanding correctly, the 32 homeless students, those are both local and students that we now might be transporting.
It could be, yeah, it could be a student that starts out locally and goes somewhere else. It could be a student that, I mean, it's generally a student that starts out here
Okay.
and goes somewhere, and then we have to, they're allowed to be brought back for continuance.
Okay.
And that's all, if I could just add, that's all completely driven by state and
Yep.
federal
Yeah.
regulations.
No, I was just trying to understand if it was the whole bucket. And then my last question is just when we're looking at these costs, so, thinking about the sped local, I happen to know at least one of us has a nurse on it. So I didn't know if that was part of the figures here or if like that would be considered something, like having the staffing on the buses, if that's considered something different from this budget.
Well, we do track salaries, obviously. I mean, most of my folks are 19.75 hours. We do have a couple of 40-hour drivers. Brendan doesn't come out of my budget, I don't believe, because he's nursing, so. But if he's watching, we're lucky to have him,
Yeah.
so.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just curious of what is included in these numbers, that's all. So.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good, Nate.
So kind of going off Robin's theme on the drivers, Jim, just to clarify, 'cause I think you already said it, but I want to be sure I understand. Are we currently losing any utilization because we don't have a driver in place right now?
No, right now we
Okay.
are fairly
Fully
covered.
staffed.
Yeah, fully staffed. I mean, I know that the committee is aware that we are down one.
Noted.
I was we are in the process of breaking up that route and trying to find capacity in the existing routes, just so that we can have that covered for the end of the year. But I would consider ourselves to be fully staffed at the moment,
Okay.
barring any unforeseen circumstances.
Okay. And do we have substitutes available? I mean, obviously someone's going to get sick. Something's
We do
gonna
have
come up.
one, potentially two substitutes.
Okay.
We don't have a lot, and that the initial substitute helped us out immensely over the last 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks,
Okay.
while we went through that transition. But they really are only available in the morning.
Okay.
On that theme then,
Yeah.
what happens when there isn't a substitute and you need a van driver?
Well, in some cases, I drive.
Okay.
We've closed the gap a few times on that.
Yep.
It's not something that I agree with doing, but there are ramifications for not doing it.
Yeah, and what's the level of frequency that you're needed to do that?
Well, it's kind of a moving target. It floats. During some of the shifts that we've had over the last couple of weeks where we were down a driver permanently and down a driver temporarily, it was fairly frequent.
Okay.
But if we don't, the alternative to that is
Not great.
not great.
Yeah.
Parents, so we kind of close the gap as a team effort, but sometimes I have to pitch in and help close the gap.
Understandable. Yeah, just a tough scenario. Sorry. But
I was just going to say maybe it's an adder for just conversation for our kind of bulk of subs. And I would also recommend we relook at the pay, because I would say we could probably be paying someone, even if it's $20 or $25 for that short period, it might be worth our while to ensure that we have
Yeah.
people on deck
Yep.
to make sure that's happening.
Yeah, definitely. Michael?
Speaking of all this, can you go through what a day in the life of what you do in the transportation does, right? So like we have Vendetti and, they, I guess, coordinate some of the routes, and then, you coordinate internal, but I don't really know the big, how does it all come together? What does our transportation director do?
So we manage the relationship with Vendetti,
Mhm.
which is frequent. That's adds and subtractions that come through me and Denise. So it's basically it's coordination. The routes are coordinated at the beginning of the year, and they're managed by exception throughout the year. So any changes, variations, complaints, concerns, or updates to the routes are done by either myself or Denise at Vendetti. Vendetti holds the master license to Versatran, so I can't make any system updates, but we connect on any variability to our yellow busing routes. In addition to that, I field any complaints from parents. I also am responsible for doing all the sourcing for SPED non-local, for McKinney-Vento, scheduling of field trips, and managing any driver-related issues, up to and including the facilitation of repairs, vehicle issues, etc. So it could be a myriad of things in one day.
So maintenance of our vehicles, that goes through your,
The maintenance of our vehicles, 7D inspections of our vehicles, state inspections of our vehicles, all go through me.
And
la-
can I add to that?
Yeah.
Just because I think Jim's underselling it a little bit. There's an incredible level of communication that needs to take place, and it goes from everything from a child who the parents are expecting home, who decides to stay after for an after-school program, and there's a breakdown in communication, so Jim is talking to the building administration, the parents, and the bus company. A child doesn't get off the bus. There's hundreds of things that happen within a day that just requires a ton of just regular communication that happens. He's got routes going from the beginning of the day through the end of the day, midday, and then there's field trips and athletic trips that also issues occur on those too.
Yeah, it's a lot of touch points throughout the day, but a lot of it, again, to Kevin's point, is communication. I was just trying to think of tactical things that I was doing during the day, but there are a lot of non-tactical as well.
Sure. I have 2 more bits of that. So you mentioned that you fill in sometimes, which I get it. How many hours do you think? Because obviously you're really expensive to be driving a bus.
Yeah.
So, how many hours a week? How does that work out in a month? I know it changes, but just give us an idea.
Well, if I have to drive in the morning and in the afternoon, I can count on having at least an hour and a half in the morning, an hour and a half in the afternoon.
Okay.
Per day.
And it varies throughout the year. like Jim
Of
said.
course, yeah. Last question. So it seems like there's a lot of coordination, which is great. So you're also dealing with community use. At what point do we separate the 2 positions? Are we there?
Well, I guess that's a conversation for you guys. I can't speak highly enough about the community use staff, so.
Yeah, no, I mean just because if you're
Workload.
oversubscribed, your workload.
Right.
At what point we're looking to you? Like you're like, hey, it's time for me to shed this off and have community use run it, or Chris will take it, or something of the sort. Like, are we at that point, or is it?
I don't know. I think that kind of warrants a discussion, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
with Chris and the staff, and then kind of figure out where they are. I don't want to speak for them and say, hey, here you go.
Here you go. Yeah.
By the way.
Yeah.
But I think it does warrant a discussion. Again, Chris has done an amazing job. Julie and Lori do an amazing job. And they've done a great job expanding the programmatic landscape for what they offer as well. So why don't I take the action to have a conversation with them, and then I can get back to the team.
Sure. Yeah. Great.
That sounds good. Yeah, and based on, the complexity of your job day to day, almost seems like
It has grown.
it's starting,
I mean,
we're moving in that direction, so I
Yeah, and
appreciate those questions.
We're in
Mike.
budget season, so that's why it's
Yeah, no,
popping
fair.
up, and now's
Absolutely.
the time to start thinking about that. So.
Yep.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
So, John?
No, I just want to say that these combined roles worked well in the past. In the past would be 5, 6, 8 years ago, maybe not so much in the past 3, 4 years. So it's definitely time to explore, separating the 2 roles. And it's, Jim and I have spoken about that offline, and it's been a casual conversation here. So it probably warrants, as Jim said, another more in-depth discussion in the future.
Absolutely. I can coordinate that offline if you want. Try to get us to the table and we can talk about it.
Yeah.
Maybe just layering onto that a little bit, Jim. I would think a lot of what you just described must take administrative support. Do you currently have that?
I don't. I have Leslie Pettinari as a 0.5 for now.
Okay.
And I mean, just to give you an idea of the workload, I pulled some numbers for her from August. She has facilitated 427 invoices and 165 POs for me while I'm doing other things.
In your time in this role, have you been able to connect with other peers, if you will, in terms of transportation directors?
I have. I've attended a couple events. The last one I went to was a TSA event at Blackstone Valley, sponsored by Vendetti, and it was very interesting.
Great.
Yeah.
Could you do some outreach and figure out within those departments who owns calculating the circuit breaker? Because it's a question that we've been trying to navigate internally in terms of figuring out the right home. I'd just be curious how other areas are doing it. Is that possible?
It's possible.
Where
Yeah,
it
I have some
lives?
connections in Brookline and Natick.
Just to know where
and-
it lives.
Yep.
That would be great. Okay, awesome.
Absolutely.
And then kind of going on with the theme where Matt was a little while ago. So talk to us about, as you're building the budget, how you leverage current data to figure out where we should be for next year, because we obviously have had overages. We continue to have overages. Some of the projections for next year are, consistent or lower. And so how do we think about where to move that forward? And honestly, I'll be totally transparent. My sensitivity, Kathy, is around you leaving and us trying to navigate this in a very tight budget season and ensuring that we start in the right place so that we're not caught shorthanded too soon or ever.
I mean, that's a great question. I don't know. I mean, I personally, I would probably want to have a conversation with Kath, maybe offline, look at some actuals over the last 3 to 5 years, try to come up with a reasonable number for next year that includes some of our potential growth. Maybe add, 3 to 5% on top of that for inflationary growth and potential immigration into the community.
So maybe you've done that, Kathy, so that doesn't sound like it was maybe it's separate, the process that gave us the budget that we reviewed in January?
I have to be honest, the only budget meeting I missed was the transportation budget.
Okay.
So I have to rely on Kevin and Craig for any insight.
Just from the source, I'm just trying to understand how we got to the numbers that were presented to us.
Yeah, you know what, I can't recall honestly, the conversation.
So you
was
didn't
one
provide
of
them, I guess is where
I
I'm
did
going.
not.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's worthy of
Yeah.
future follow-up, just to understand the
Right.
transportation numbers. Okay, sorry, Ken.
So
Okay.
I did historical analysis,
Okay,
but I also did that same analysis last year, as we talked about,
Yep.
and made a significant increase this year.
Mhm.
But it's not at this point driven by any kind of percentage increase.
okay,
It has to be more of the data that you're referring to in student population at this stage, in my opinion, because
Sure.
there is a fall off that we keep seeing.
okay.
And one thing I'll say too is that, we talked about like huge student enrollment growth.
Yep.
And I think, looking at some of this data over the last couple of months, we've seen growth in in-town transportation that we just haven't seen historically. And again, I think, Kathy addressed that earlier, I think there's a few different points where we need to look at this.
Okay.
Because, I don't want to say it was flat, but it was kind of growing at a slower rate, and it kind of doubled over the last few years, which
Mhm.
is significant.
Got it.
And I think we've got to look at that and a few other things.
Go ahead.
Yeah, based on that budget, this sheet,
Yep.
the two bigger ones is, the third grouping down, going from the budget amount other, going from 45 to 115, and then the budget amount salaries, right? So that adds in that, I'm assuming, for the 24-25 column, right? So
Right here.
that's this,
Oh, okay.
the spreadsheet, right? So is this what we're budgeting? What these numbers were in here? Is this
No.
our 20
So
FY 25 budget?
No, so
Okay.
there's budget adjustments in each one of those years. So as it says, the budgeted amount in each one of your
Yeah.
columns,
Yeah,
and then there's an actual spend underneath it.
right,
So if you look at the bottom line, Chris, we'll start
Yes.
there. The 935,000 actually began the year before budget adjustments with school committee
right,
at 720. So to balance that budget, I had to bring budget requests in the
Right.
amount of 235.
Yep.
And then the next year, the 1.3 million,
Mhm.
same thing.
Right.
Last year, we budgeted and began the year at 790. No, which year am I at? Yes, 790,000, and we had to do a budget adjustment of 510 at
Right.
the end of the year to make the budget neutral.
So
okay.
that's what I was hoping to
Right.
get at here, Kathy.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chris.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Is those reallocations I feel like we need visibility to, because
Yes.
it's important to us to know, did we approve 200 and it was really so I'm not sure how to create that visibility, because it sounds like,
Well, we did a $400,000 increase again this year, and
Yeah.
that is in our budget packet numbers. But again, I don't think it's down to the dollar. I think it's more about what is happening with the student population, because you can't go with with local sped transportation of 60 students up to 102. Something is driving that.
absolutely.
So that's where Jim doesn't have the resources available to him to make any kind of change. Because all of those vans are doing slingshot routes.
Like when a typical van route in town, I'm assuming you try to keep it within a time frame too. I mean, you're limited by seat capacity, but also I'm assuming there's got to be a time capacity or time
Yeah, so
window.
say, for example, like, you're going to pick up at Stacy around 2:15. You're going to finish that route, and you're going to go get back in line at Woodland. You're going to go get back in line at Brookside.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But
So,
Kathy,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Even still, right? The total, what's the total actual sped? You're talking sped local.
Yes. It's gonna be lower because we're using all our vans. We're not using, the vans don't come with a significant cost.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're
See
saying
what I'm
because it
saying?
can't offset. I'm
Yes.
sorry. I'm sorry. I understand now.
Exactly.
Thank you. Okay, thanks for the
And
clarification.
then I
Okay.
believe, like, we do have costs that we've, increased this year with the yellow bus
Mhm.
transporting down from Main Street. That's outside of our budget. That was, you know,
Mhm.
a new ad.
Got it.
So, you
Okay.
know, that's outside of policy as to what we would normally transport.
Got it.
Right.
That's really helpful. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the budget wise? Because Kathy just made the great segue to the new bus.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Any other budget questions to Jim? And the impacts there? Yeah, I want
Maybe,
to.
can I get one more budget question?
Yeah, please,
Sorry.
go ahead.
One item that was presented to us, Jim, and maybe you were part of it, maybe you weren't, was the request for bus monitors. Is there any thought that if we were to provide bus monitors, we could get additional kids on the bus?
Quicker?
No.
No, then avoid individualized transportation because they would potentially have some sort of support on a bus. I have no idea. I'm just
No,
being,
not really.
throw out some.
It's a lot.
Okay.
The bus monitors, honestly, are, the concept around the bus monitors is try to keep an orderly,
Right.
in some cases, language barrier,
Okay.
buffer.
Got it. Yeah. Fair. Okay.
Michael?
I have a little off topic, still transportation and buses though. We had a request from a member of the public about potentially putting cameras on buses or asking about it. Have we put any thought into that, or do you have any recommendations yet, or is it up to the school committee?
I think it would kind of be up to you guys. I mean, I don't know if I don't really have the authorization to do that. I know.
What's your opinion?
I mean, I think,
Sorry.
I never would have thought I would have said yes, but I mean, there's probably some validity behind a discussion around it. I know when, dare I say, when I was here, we had a rough proposal about it like 3 or 4 years ago that Joe did. And I'm not sure it had the appetite for that at the time, but things are different today, so I feel like it might be worth it. I mean, it is definitely going to be an expenditure. I think back in the day when he put that original analysis together, it was like 80 grand. So, I mean, it just cost me, I put radios in the buses recently, and even two-way radios cost almost $10,000. So I can't imagine cameras and everything is going to be under a 6-figure note. So I think that's definitely something for you guys to table.
And if I could add just one more thing to that, there's also a contractual piece with Vendetti for the actual buses, which would be different than
Sure.
our own personal
Right.
vans. So those are
Yeah.
two
There's
different
two
kind of.
components.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to see if the discussions started happening, and obviously this will take some time to flesh out. So.
Yep, no, it's a good question.
Mhm.
Well, your bid is going out next year, so
The what?
the bid for the transportation bid, so you could make that a component of your bid, a requirement to have cameras.
Could you,
I have so
That'd
many
be a
questions.
stipulation then?
I think we
Yeah.
should take
Yeah.
the
I
Potentially
mean,
camera
a
discussion.
stipulate,
Yeah.
here's the cost if you were to add, so that way you can see the difference
Well,
between,
It's all
but
the
You
Vendetti
could,
anyway.
you could make it a separate line within
separate
your
line,
bid.
yeah,
Sure.
just to get an idea, but, I'm sorry, Mike, did you have more?
No, I think we should table the actual camera thing because
Yeah.
there's a whole line.
Go there, yeah.
It's a rabbit hole.
No.
It
Yeah.
is.
So
Right.
just kind of thinking, going back to more the local transportation, I'm wondering if, and I apologize, I'm not sure when Lucy will be coming to a meeting soon anyway, but if we would want to have as a future agenda item, having her come in to talk, because she would probably have the best estimate of how many kids are going to need the specialized transportation next year, right? So when we're looking at the budget and looking at the numbers, I think she would know better than anyone.
Mhm.
I'm also curious if our special ed numbers in general have increased, and that's in some way related to the number of kids needing specialized transportation.
So they've increased slightly, but
Okay.
we're still below the state average. It's the one kind of high needs group that we're actually below the state average in terms of, but it is like growing.
Yeah.
But not like at the same, like I wouldn't say the growth that we've seen in-town transportation is not commensurate with the growth that we've seen percentage-wise with the overall special ed population.
Yeah, so, I mean, it might be worth just getting her insight on how much the cost she thinks it's gonna be, and she'll know next year what the numbers would be. I also, thinking about our buses and getting cameras, I would want to have bus monitors be part of that talk. Because I wonder if the reason why we were talking about getting a camera, if we had another adult, could benefit that. And I'm just thinking, full disclosure, having a child on a special ed transportation, just some things for, if she were to have a seizure, I don't want that recorded. So just like things like that, I'm just thinking about dignity for the kids on the bus, where maybe having another adult could be a different option we can look at. So just
Fair enough.
out there.
Megan?
So just wanted to get clarification for the analysis that you're suggesting, which sounds critical as we evaluate where our budget's going to go next year. Who needs to be a part of that? Like, who are the participants that would need to sit together to do that analysis?
Well, I think if it's in fact driven by IEPs, of course, the special ed office, that would be Lucy through the team chairs. And the actual numbers are obviously already available to us for a spreadsheet. But it would be great to have the projected numbers as the school year comes to an end and the year-end IEP meetings start happening. So all of those details are gonna be available to us May or June. So there should be some planning opportunities, say mid-June, the latest.
So I heard Lucy and the team chairs, Kathy. Is there others?
I'd say transportation, probably
Yeah.
business, superintendent,
Okay.
Not a district coordinator.
yep.
Who's that, Jim?
Lisa Soto.
Oh, sorry, yeah, thanks. Okay. So I would just ask, we can get to future agenda items later, but that just sounds like a really great next step, if we can commit to making that happen, just so we're all aligned. Yeah, okay, thanks.
Makes sense.
Sorry.
Sorry, just to add one more person to the mix, I'm wondering if Lisa Kincaid, because of the Kincaid with the homelessness.
Yeah, MB, good
Excellent.
question, yep, good.
Good point.
Sorry, we forgot Lisa, sorry, Lisa.
If the questions are done, I was just gonna leave the topic with one thought, which was just, we heard last night with the MPAC that distance and walking and weather conditions are a concern, and as we continue this discussion and try to plan this out, I do think it's important to keep in mind that potential changes or additions to busing may have a positive impact on attendance. So as expensive as it can be, and as much as it may hurt to have to battle more buses and try to find more help, anything we can do, obviously, to impact the attendance problem is something that we have to take into consideration too. So I think that this discussion is far from over. Between what you said, Rob, and you kind of stole my idea there too, which you said it much better than I probably would have anyway, which was getting to the next level of the discussion on how we're getting to so many vans, but also, what other ways we can get kids to school.
And if I could just jump in, we might get some data on that too, because we're trying to pilot. The bus capacity is basically full, K through 8, and we're trying to add a stopper. The high school is not at capacity. We're trying to add a stop or two to see if, that helps with attendance, and we should be able to get some data on that.
That's great.
It won't be like the be-all and end-all, but at least it, might show us something.
Brendan?
Yeah, just real quick, Jim, I actually appreciate all that you're doing, and I think everyone does too. I know it's really difficult. I think at the beginning of your discussion, you mentioned that you're having difficulties with crossing guards. Is that correct? Or did I hear that correctly or no?
Yes and no.
Okay.
My crossing guards are great. However, again, very similar situation to 7D drivers. Very difficult to staff, very difficult to source, and it's an aging population. We've had a few instances where people have just, they quit. The turnover attrition rate is high.
Sure.
I think it's a great gig if it fits your lifestyle, but it's very difficult to. The ones that we have been fiercely loyal that are still there, so I will say that and thank them all, and I try to, but it's difficult to get folks. And similar to 7D, we've run ads and put out Facebook posts and all sorts of stuff trying to get people to be a crossing guard, but it's hard. So if you know anybody, let me know. But yes, there are a couple of we try to. With the remaining group that we have, we try to hit all the high impact areas. There are some lesser, like what we would consider to be phase 2 areas that we don't have staffing on, but we definitely, like Nadine Ledoux is at the nexus of the universe down at Stacy and School Street. I mean, God bless her. So, if, when she's out, we ask Milford Police to fill in because there absolutely has to be somebody there.
Okay.
Both sides, and Gloria's position in the middle. So it's, but we might not be able to cover everything all the time, but we do have some people that are out on that will be back.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Kind of, you already answered my question, so cool.
Yeah, pleasure.
Quickly, because I know we've been been up here for a while. So the new bus route that we've added that stops that comes down Central Street,
Yeah,
stops at South
Mazzarelli's.
Central. Like, what was the premise behind that?
That
You
was,
know,
as Matt said, it's an attendance increasing effort, just to try to get kids within the walk zone to the high school.
Yeah.
And it's current bus routes that we're just grabbing a stop, like it's an
Okay.
additional
Yeah,
stop.
that bus is
Yeah.
going right
So it's
Yeah,
not a-
and
it's not
that's
a-
why, yeah, I
it's-
was trying to
and
understand.
It's because
it.
we have capacity on the buses.
So there's
we're just-
capacity
Only at the high
coming
school.
down.
We're just
As
piloting it to see if
Yeah,
it,
and
like it yields positive results.
Yeah.
and that has started.
No.
It's
has
starting
not
soon,
started.
it's starting soon, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
it hasn't launched yet.
All right, so I can't ask about how ridership's going then.
I can't, no.
And we're actually,
Yeah.
I think we're putting a certain number of spots
Wildly
on
successful.
the.
Yeah, that's, yeah, I got, it was just
You got the
from,
email from
I got the
Josh, yeah.
email, and that's why it made me
Yeah.
think about it, because, do you know if anybody's registered?
They
for it?
have.
They have.
I
Have we-
can't tell you
have
if
we-
it's up to capacity or not.
Yeah,
Well, last time I talked to
Yeah.
him, it was like 7 or 8, and I think
Yeah.
the target is 20.
and,
But that was like a week ago.
yeah, and the reason was it that bus route because that's the only one that had capacity, or was there a
Well, yes and
population
no.
that we were
It was
trying to target in that area?
It was basically both. There
Yeah.
was a bus that had capacity that was going through an area that we knew we were gonna pass anyway.
Mhm.
We didn't have a bus coming to the high school that was gonna drive by the police station or the town hall, but we knew we had one going by Maz's, so we figured we'd set it up there first. I mean, that whole area is within the walk zone, but
Right.
that definitely has kids that have attendance issues.
All pun intended, it is uphill to school from there.
It literally
It
uphill.
is uphill all
Both
Yes,
ways.
yes. So on that, I just want to make sure. Yeah, so thank you for that overview.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was just trying to understand why, because again, it was within the policy of the ridership zone.
Yep.
And, but knowing that it's, again, that it's on a open route, or a current route with space, it's.
And it's a pilot, so we'll
And
see
it's
how it
basically,
works.
you know, I looked at it from the standpoint of, budgetary wise, like, oh my God, we're bleeding, and we just added 2 bus stops. Why? So, but it's, the bus is
Yeah,
going by there
it's
anyway,
going by
so
there.
that answers that question for me,
Yep.
so, thank you.
No cost, and we're trying to think outside the box to just get kids in school.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
Yep. So, any other questions on that one?
Just very quickly, did it help changing the start times this year? Has that helped with?
That's not, yes and no.
Okay.
That's still a discussion that Kevin and I are gonna have before the end of this year. But it worked out fairly well.
It's mostly yes.
Okay. More yes than no, sounds good.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the transportation side? Well, thank you very much. Appreciate
pleasure.
all the information that you provided and then the answers to all the questions.
I mean, obviously, you guys, feel free to reach out direct if you have any other questions or
Yep.
anything I can do for you. If you
Yep.
wanna have any offline discussions, feel free, my door's always open.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Some more work
Thanks,
to do,
Jim.
so, excellent. All right, moves us on then to an audit update.
Yeah, so, the committee has the, formal bound copy that, was mailed to us, this week. And I have a brief summary and, some of the recommendations from the auditor that I'll share. We essentially had concerns that were identified over poor management and expenditures associated with the facilities department in FY 2019. The committee opted to engage the services of an independent accounting firm to assess these concerns. Over the past 7 months, CPA Eric Kinserf and his team conducted the audit and targeted specific vendors and accounts that were identified as warranting further scrutiny. His finalized report has been submitted to us, and I've been asked to provide the committee with a summary of his report and findings. You should all have a copy of his in-depth report. His audit involved examining 280 invoices associated with the facilities department in FY 2021 and 22. Again, he focused on specific vendors and accounts that were identified. As a result of the audit, he identified several flaws with purchasing practices associated with the facilities department, specifically a lack of accountability and oversight for goods and services being delivered. He found instances where it appeared vendors billed us for goods and/or services that appeared to not have been delivered, or invoices that were inflated above and beyond what was delivered. Some vendors had submitted an exorbitant number of invoices for goods or services at a level that would seem to lack plausibility of consistency with our needs. After reporting his findings and collaborating with leadership officials in our district, Mr. Kinshirf identified several recommendations to address the flaws that he found, and they are as follows. First, consult with town council and determine which legal avenues to pursue, such as notifying the Inspector General's office due to these contractors having the approved procurement under state bid vendors, as well as the Attorney General's office for instances of what appears to be fraud. The district's invoice and processing procedures should also be reviewed and amended. Some of the recommendations are as follows. No invoice paid without the identification of the school and the location where goods and services have been delivered. We have essentially addressed some of this by decentralizing custodial supplies coming to the high school, and immediately, as of last year, we moved that to each building custodian. Create and require an attestation form for repair, maintenance services over 2,500, which is essentially signatures almost similar to a contract that the department head and the vendor are certifying the work completed, and a possible review of each building principal also being a outside participant agreeing that the work has been done in his or her building. Considering requiring without exclusion that all vendors are to include a PO on all invoices. Develop an inventory system to track supplies by each building. This was difficult for us to verify custodial supply invoicing, which essentially was the amount of $250,000 of custodial supplies in 1 year, and we could not really locate any custodial inventory. The district should also consider hiring the facilities director as right now Carlos has been hired as an assistant facilities director, so I think this is a recommendation again for oversight. The district should consider hiring an auditor or an outside auditor to perform periodic inspections for all purchases and services greater than a specific amount. And I feel this is one that should be significantly considered because it really is easy access to filing system when we're processing any invoice from the maintenance department for whether goods or services. We simply create another file, and for the year we have a maintenance process file. And that individual could come in, review the invoice or the work, and go to the appropriate building and confirm that in fact that it's billed appropriately and not exorbitant. The district should review its procurement policies to ensure compliance. The district should follow up on the 2 items not located during the inspection. This was simply during the contractors that came at the Christmas vacation break. They pulled specific invoices to review and confirm, and 2 of the areas could not be confirmed. They were vague, such as gymnasium doors, and high school gymnasium doors, but the work could not be found to have any kind of new construction or repair. So that, again, is a recommendation. And same kind of final recommendation is addressing the lack of detail and vagueness on some of the invoices. It was it just became overly vague and comfortable, and to include specific area goods or services are delivered. So that essentially is all the recommendations, and I do believe that, these recommendations are easy to build into the structure of the central office. It's not asking so much that it's not an easy fix to get more detailed, and the reasonableness can be more comfortable with processing our vendors' invoices. So that is the summary of the audit. I don't know if we have questions, but that is what came out of all of his work. And thanks to Meg, she was a wonderful partner with our meetings with the CPA firm, and was a valuable asset with her background. So we were lucky to have her.
Thank you for that, and yes, thank you for the pointing out to Megan. That was just about to say the same thing, and we appreciate your efforts in that. Obviously, it's something that your background had some background in, so it was certainly appreciated from this side of the board. I guess I'll open it up to you first, Megan, if there's anything more to add from your side of it, and then we can open up to full questions.
Mostly it would be reiterating. That was an amazing summary, Kathy, so thanks for taking the time to prepare that. I would just share with the committee, just for your benefit, the nature of this engagement wasn't an external audit, right? We didn't want the balances confirmed. We wanted real detailed testing, so we did an agreed upon procedure review, which is why you don't see a formal opinion in the document. Validating certain services was incredibly difficult because at the time we went to do it, there isn't currently someone who works here that was in facilities at the time. And so it was hard in some cases to draw conclusions, because if it said they did a door at Milford High School, well, there's a lot of doors. And so I think we're looking for a lot more specificity going forward. Certainly validating custodial supplies became a challenge, particularly if they dated back to 2019 or 2020. So I think the real takeaway for me on an ongoing basis, in addition to following up on these items, is it's critical that we follow our established policies and that we hold our employees accountable to following our established policies, as well as our administration. And so, we need to be expecting vendors to be accountable. And so as we're reviewing things on the warrant, we should be pushing back, if we're not seeing those things, to make sure that we're seeing the PO, where the work was performed, et cetera. So I think with these improvements to controls, would really ensure in the environment going forward, Kathy, that we wouldn't be open to, something potentially happening.
Correct. I agree.
Thanks.
No problem. All right, Michael.
Thank you for both doing this. Just curious to both of you, do you think we got our money's worth with the audit?
Money's worth for sure.
Okay, great.
Matt.
So I guess my question now is, it's what's next, right? What do we do? Do we have to create policies? I mean, there are a handful of things in the recommendations that I honestly thought was just common sense practice. Invoices on POs and stuff like that, matching, having an inventory of the stuff you're buying. A little frustrating that these are the pieces that are being called out. It kind of feels like, a parent calling you out, like, why weren't you doing this? So what do we do going forward? Is it a policy?
Go ahead.
So I have the same questions, but I just want to point out that we had some informal policies that our Assistant Superintendent for Business tried to put in place that were flat out ignored. So what do we do next? I mean, is it enough for the administration putting a policy that's been allowed to be ignored in the past? Or do we have to go to putting in a formal school committee policy on all these details? We need to know that 20 gallons of Zepp cleaner went to middle school, high school, whatever else school. So I don't know where we go, but I think I just want to point out that some of the controls that are suggested here were attempted to be implemented and were ignored, including not doing a work without a PO, and it was done. We had to have a special meeting or a special topic on a meeting in order to pay a vendor because they did the work, they didn't get a PO, the supervisor was instructed to not do any work without a PO, the vendor did the work, and of course they deserve to be paid. So I don't think it was through any fault of the vendor, but so I guess I'm raising more questions than answers. I don't know where we go with this, but some of this is basically not new news.
Michael.
To kind of indirectly, maybe whatever, answer this question. So I think there's, I don't think it's a school committee policy. To your point, the business office will create their own internal, policies for financial. I know that there was some put in place and somebody may have not followed those policies. So, culture is what you tolerate. So I think as a district, we just can't tolerate that behavior. And I think of, Meg brought this up a while ago, making sure that, the district employees are getting annual reviews to catch these things early so it doesn't happen for years and years and years and years, right? So again, culture is what we tolerate. So I think there's a culture we have to bring into the district, which is making sure that there are, consistent reviews going on, and if somebody's not following policies, the formal procedures are followed to, do discipline or correct it or termination, right? So I think that's the answer, is that it comes down from the school committee to the superintendent to the business office to the employees. Culture is what you tolerate, and we as a district tolerated, some of this behavior for a long time, so I think moving forward, we need to make sure, to Meg's point, school committee needs to be checking the warrants, and if we see something missing, we go to, Kathy or Kevin and saying, hey, there's something missing here, and then it just keeps rolling down to make sure. So I think that's the next step.
I would just interject with, we have I don't know if to call it an opportunity, Kathy, because I hate to see you go, but I think with the hiring of a new business person, it is critical that whatever it is that we require needs to be put on paper. And so I don't know, Kathy, where that lives today, but I think our expectations need to be outlined, drafted, so that we ensure that smooth transition happens, and so that there's no gaps when that transition
She or he
Yep.
will be getting a copy of this.
Excellent.
As well as a summary of the recommendations.
But to John's point, our current procedures, Kathy, is that in a manual as well, or something in terms of the PO requirement, for example?
Not to the detail that would be helpful. It's
Okay.
really an oversight of more federal guidelines that are required for documentation.
Okay.
It's not to the level of our systems.
Okay. So that might be an ask of you in the next couple months, that to the extent that there's things that would be valuable to have outlined in more detail,
Oh, sure.
to ensure.
So to Meg's point, it sounds like there's some tribal knowledge that we need to get on paper.
Yes.
Well, I think there were some that were put in writing and just flat out ignored as well, so I don't know who's gonna be the ultimate responsibility on that. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely work with Kathy on that and make sure that transition occurs.
Yeah,
I think that's critically important. I agree.
I mean, if an employee's instructed to do something and they flat out don't do it, the example, we had to pay the vendor, he did the work, wasn't his fault the PO wasn't issued, it was somebody within our district, so. Somebody that had the authority to authorize the work, so we need to put more controls in place on that or something.
And I think that's my discussion on the what's next and the controls, because I mean, ultimately things were not there, and things were avoided and ignored or just outright didn't happen. And as a result, we had to commission an audit that wasn't cheap. And I don't want to have to get back there in 3 or 4 or 5 years being like, we had this done, we got this information, we kind of half handled it, and now we're back here again. And I don't think it should be a committee policy, but we have to have something, I think, clear and in writing, and an understanding of how this is going to flow from us all the way down, so that we catch it much sooner. Like you said, whether it's this is the time to revisit that giant stack of invoices over there that we have 12 seconds to look through while we're going through these meetings, or maybe there's another way to do that. I don't know, but we
And
definitely
they're
have to.
available in the central office if anybody wants to ever come in too.
Right,
Yeah.
but the idea of coming in to look through 75 pieces of paper in the middle of the day, we have everything
Yeah,
else
I mean, it's
going on,
not, yeah, it's not.
is-
it's fine.
Yeah, well, no,
All right,
that's
so
what
you're
the-
highly compensated for that time, so.
Yes.
No,
you know.
but years ago, I asked, can these things be scanned to us a week in advance? And it seemed like it was probably just too big of a task at that time, but, I mean, it is tough. I mean, central office is open to us, but we all have full-time day jobs, so it's not easy to come in and digest
No,
these
agreed.
things, so.
No, and I think that goes back to your point of who's ultimately responsible, right? I mean, our eyes go over those, but we're not the only eyes going over those, and there are people who are doing this for a living, and who are all the way down to the person asking for the PO and getting the invoice put together. So we just,
Yeah.
I think, have to be very, very specific and clear about how this works going forward.
And we can't really say no. If the work was done, the work was done.
Absolutely.
Other people authorized the work, so.
Simple question: when we sign the paper, does that get physically brought to town hall or
We keep that
Or here.
signature on file, yeah.
here? So
They're all, yeah, and when the auditors come in, we have those available.
so it doesn't physically go to town hall.
All the bills do, not the signature page.
Oh, so there's a lot
Yes,
of.
those go every week to town hall.
And then keep in mind, we approve it, then the select board is really chief executive
Yeah.
officers, they approve it on, at the next level up from us.
Yeah, interesting.
So their eyes are on it too,
Well, they're,
as much as they can be, obviously.
yeah.
If I could throw a positive out there, I'd say that, the new team we have in place has been very responsive and very engaged so far, so, hopefully that continues.
I guess, I'll point out, section D of our policy is just that, fiscal management and fiscal management goals. Something that eventually policy will get to, but I guess, Kathy, when we look at, is this section, all these fiscal management policies, does that relate to here?
Yes.
And so what you're speaking of, and I couldn't even come up with a specific point because there was so much there, there were aspects of this report that didn't follow the policies. And there's also aspects of this report that says our policies should be adjusted.
Better enforced is the way that I would
Okay.
take it.
Yep.
And I think John said it best, that my concerns were long before 2019.
Right.
And of no fault of the fiscal central office, business office, did we
Yeah.
not try to enforce those?
Right.
So I want to be clear about that, and I also want to be very clear that I 100% want this report to go to the Attorney General's office for the town of Milford to be charged $40,000 for a boiler work that was offline for over 10 years.
You just answered my next question.
So
Thank
that
you.
to me is, it should come back to the town of Milford in some capacity, as well as all the energy conservation piece in here was the rebate era. So we were due rebates that we did not receive, and I think that is a state bid vendor that needs to be reviewed. It's just a recommendation that I think that needs to happen.
Yeah. And I'm sorry if I didn't mean that by this policy that your staff wasn't following it. It's just that, this is the guidance, this is the playbook, right, for it. And it needs either to be reviewed a little bit more, right, and so everybody understands it, or it needs some more thought through on it to make sure we can tighten it up and that everybody fully understands it. So,
This position needs autonomy and
Yeah.
needs to feel comfortable with moving forward in any directive with an employee, and they're following our own fiscal policies.
It seems, I'm sorry, did anybody else?
Go ahead.
I just started talking. Some of the things
It's not-
recommended in here, we have some of them in place, they're just not being adhered to.
right, yep.
So can I request that we get all existing documentation so we can figure out where the gaps are that we need to address? Because my preference would be that we address those, Kathy, before you leave, because you have such in-depth knowledge of what we've been through to ensure that documentation exists that we can then hand to someone else. So that would be my ask as we move forward.
Correct,
I
yeah,
agree with that.
definitely. Matt?
So my comment was gonna be based on recommendation, number 4. District should work towards filling the vacant facilities director piece. Something we started with at budget time, a discussion that I think that Chris and I especially were pretty strong on in terms of the facilities department not being whole yet. And this may be dipping into the facilities subcommittee discussions a little bit, but our current team is phenomenal. They do a lot of good. But they still don't have the time to even get back, I think, and close some tickets and wrap up resolution codes and stuff like that in a timely manner. And if we need somebody to also be ensuring that POs are being done right and that inventory is coming in and being checked, and it seems as though right now it's a struggle just to get our team back to the office in front of a computer to close out some stuff. I don't know if we have the time and the ability to bring in or discuss an admin or somebody else that can help with this year, but it seems more and more likely that we need somebody else to be the support person at a desk working this kind of stuff, especially if our staff is small enough where our assistant facilities director at the time is out there working a lot of this stuff, a day in and day out. So just more fuel for that battle.
I mean, Matt, you made a comment, and I try to think about in terms of the inventory control, and you would have thought that we had that kind of data. The custodial department in their ordering, I can't imagine how you would keep a log of X number Kleenex boxes. I mean, what they're ordering is not expensive items, so to have someone sit and take an inventory just does not seem reasonable.
No, not to keep an active inventory, but when you buy 500 boxes of tissues, you have to know you got 500 boxes of tissues. Restaurants do it all the time. If they buy 27,000 plates, they know they got what they paid
But they have a point of
for.
sale system, which is automatic.
It can be, yes, I agree with that, but you have a technology inventory tracking system, for example, slapping stickers on spots on shelves. I mean, there's ways to do it. I know what you're saying. It's not, we don't have a warehouse. We don't have
No.
rolling structures, but there still needs to be somebody that knows if you bought these pieces, just like we buy 500 Chromebooks, we know we got 500 Chromebooks. Well, those are
Absolutely.
expensive. But when you look at toilet paper and tissues, we probably spend more money in consumable supplies than we do in technology equipment.
Well, that's why what I think is working so well now is bringing it down to the building base.
Yeah,
So
and maybe that
they're
is the
not
right
gonna-
answer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so now you have that day custodian, he knows his inventory. He has a secretary that's ordering all his materials for him. So you have that control. It's starting with him. She's putting in the order, then the order comes in, and then the packing slip is now sent. So there's your control without having this massive spreadsheet.
Yeah, and honestly, we may be doing a lot of that now that
Right.
we weren't when this was, in the
It
years
was
that were being looked at
centralized.
here.
Yeah, it was centralized.
To answer your question, so item 5, district should consider hiring a part-time district staff auditor, outsourced, blah, blah, blah. I think that person, I think it's a great idea, by the way, have a third party come in, could look at not just amounts, like large amounts, but say, hey, you know what, we just got a whole bunch of tissues, and they can just do quick, spot checks and go through, hey, they bought this, now go find out where they are and do it quick, just to have some kind of test to see if there's, if they're there. I don't know.
Right.
But I like that idea a lot, that there's somebody coming in, third party.
And it's not difficult.
No.
That really would be easy, in my
Mm.
opinion.
Other questions? Yes.
I just had a quick question to the point Matt made, and I could be misremembering from the budget meeting we had, but is there part-time administrative support now in the maintenance department?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I.
We have, the AD and the maintenance director share a secretary.
Okay, and that's being utilized, so they have that
Yes,
support.
I
Okay.
received some POs for Carlos today.
Okay, sounds good. And then I'm just curious, so what we were just speaking about with a part-time auditor inspecting purchases of greater than a certain amount, do you think it would ever be advantageous to do this beyond the maintenance department, or would we just keep it to that one department?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to
Okay.
that. I'm gonna
Technology is
pass
pretty
on it.
well tracked by the
Okay.
technology department. I'm just trying to think of another area where,
There's probably not a lot of other departments that have much leeway in their
like as much
expenses.
expenditure, like expenditure leeway, because
Yeah.
you're buying textbooks at the beginning of the year, and
Yeah,
they're in front of the kid or they're not.
yeah, I think so.
I would say technology-wise, I think that stuff almost self-audits it, right? It's just, devices go out at the beginning of the year, they come back, you notice a difference, and you figure out where the difference is. So I think,
Well, and things have been put in place in recent
Right.
years.
yeah,
towards
yeah,
that.
they use the asset system a lot. So I would agree that I think technology, it's expensive, but it's harder for that stuff to disappear.
And everything's tagged,
Everything's
there's
tagged.
already there's already a pretty good system.
It's almost
in sense
a self-balancing system. in
Craig,
a
do you think
sense.
of anything like on the curriculum side where that's
Yeah.
like, because I'm struggling to come up with something.
I just figured if we're talking about doing it, may as well see if it would be applicable for any other departments.
I mean, would something like athletics tracking uniforms and equipment, would that fall into this, or is that their own thing, or?
Again, like there's a rotation of like when uniforms are replaced, and like if you're number 23 and 23 doesn't come back, we have a pretty clear
Sure.
sense of what happened there, and a lot of those are like like Pete has a kind of a system where balls last a certain amount of years, helmets we have to recondition, those kinds of things that are happening regularly. So it's not quite as like asset tagged, I would say, as technology, but there's definitely like a replacement kind of like program, for lack of a better term.
Other questions?
Just a comment. I think to Kathy's, one of her earlier points, we do need to present this report and these findings to town council, the AG and the IG, or to the AG and the IG through town council, to report our findings. I mean, that seems pretty simple.
I want to end this on a positive note. Two thoughts. I was home today, and Chris came home and said my classroom was like 82 degrees. I said, "Oh, well, did you reach out to the maintenance?" She's like, "Oh yeah, I'll put a ticket in." And her response 2 years ago would have been, "Oh, it'll never get fixed." But since the response was, "Oh, I'll put a ticket in," was a really good thing. Number two, I had one of our members of the public who likes to watch our facilities call me unsolicited early this week to say that he noticed. I can't remember exactly what it was, like a hole in a fence or a hole in a bridge somewhere. He's like, "Oh, it finally got fixed after 6 years." But he made effort to call me, and usually it's negative, but this was like, "Hey, this is actually getting fixed." So they're moving, which is good.
It's really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, because until now, the classroom's never been above 62 degrees, so.
Oh.
I think that's huge.
Now it's too hot.
So I guess, the question is, do we need to vote or not to move it ahead, for Brian to review, or we just?
I don't think a vote
know.
hurts, but I think
Yeah.
any one of us can pass this on up, so it's.
Yeah, just want to
No,
make
It's
sure.
either or.
Yeah,
I think it'd be nice for us to formally ask the town council to review
Yeah.
this.
that's
Why
why I'm
not?
bringing it up.
I agree.
That's why.
I move
So-
to.
Can I make
going.
a recommendation
keep
before
going.
you make
Yeah,
the
go ahead.
motion? I would like for you to make a motion to accept all of the recommendations as provided by the CPA firm in its entirety, which includes that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a good motion.
You guys get that? So
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Item one.
so
Yeah.
Page
sorry.
22, and.
So I
yeah.
agree with you, Kathy, on that, but I think we need timelines for these things. So districts should develop an inventory system for the tracking of supplies by when?
I don't know that the motion needs the timeline as much as it is we
I
need
think
to
there's-
move forward and then carry it on.
There's two pieces: to accept the report as written and move this to town council, and then I think the second piece would be how are we going to break this out and actually make change, which I think is a large
And honestly,
discussion.
I think that change is going to take a while
I think we
too.
vote to accept this, as Kathy said, and then we work on
Yeah.
the timeline on individual items.
Yeah.
Take
But
them,
really good idea,
take them
Brendan.
next
Yeah,
meeting,
that's-
any
yeah.
one or all of them,
Mhm.
and drive down through them.
Or the motion, to Brendan's point, could be to ask Kathy to come up with timelines to implement this.
You could conclude it, maybe.
I like the motion of just what Kathy said, accept the recommendations in this audit report in their entirety.
Okay. So moved.
You make Kathy's motion.
Yeah.
So, motion by Michael to accept all the recommendations. Second by Matt. Any more discussion? Just make sure that we at least formalize that aspect of it. So I don't see any more discussion, so all in favor, and that is unanimous. So, excellent. Very good. Thank you, everyone, on that. All right. Moving on to the report from our superintendent on the MSBA process.
All right, this is a relatively quick update. This past week, we held the first meeting of the Educational Profile Committee, which is composed of Milford High School staff and administration and district administration. The full committee met briefly in the auditorium and then broke into subcommittees to answer a series of questions and engage in discussions. The group will reconvene on 3/26, 4/10, 4/30, and 5/16. And the goal of this is to get information and data to Josh and I to write the educational questionnaire profile and also engage with the Chapter 74 piece as well. All right. And the second part is, additionally, I collected materials from districts who have recently completed the eligibility period for the maintenance and capital planning information, just to see what some of the best practices were in terms of turning that information into the MSBA. I also hope to have the initial compliance certification signed prior to the end of April. I'm going to be connecting with Nina, our contact at MSBA, probably early next week, just to kind of make sure that we can do that prior to August 1st. And if, as long as we can, we'll do it before the end of April. So we're making progress and moving forward.
I guess quickly, the Chapter 74, the group that's meeting periodically, who's that consist of again?
So that's teachers, Building administration and district administration.
Of just the high school?
No,
Well,
so it's district-wide administration, like
Mhm.
central office type folks.
Sure.
And like folks that are maybe in other buildings that have multiple building responsibilities. But it's predominantly high school staff, high school administration, and then the folks who are district-wide.
Okay, great. Questions? Michael?
I have a quick update. Just a reminder. I talked to Jerry this morning about the warrant article that Meg caught the typo.
15.
So he actually, there's some miscommunication, so he's gonna fix it, so
Thank you.
it has to be taken care of.
Good catch.
No
Thank you.
So
Any-
just
yeah,
going
go ahead.
forward on that, so Kevin, the one thing, can you just add like that one pager so we just have it in front of us every time?
Yeah, I can just
And
make
then
that as a
I
pass
think the
out.
ask was to kind of go through there and say, which of these is gonna require more than a 5 minute, like which one requires a real investment? So if you could just, the next time you present it, give us a sense of like, this is gonna take 80 hours, just so we have some understanding of where there's real work to do, and it's in your head, but it would be valuable to me to
Yeah,
have that on
and
paper.
some of it, I'm not gonna, like, I can tell you, like,
Or TBD, right, that's
yeah,
fine.
yeah, I mean, I can tell you the chapter 74, the maintenance piece, and the educational questionnaire are probably the three most significant pieces that are gonna take a
It
considerable
would just be
amount of
valuable
work.
to me when you talk about it, and I can look at that and
Yeah,
see
yeah,
that
no, I
every
can
time.
definitely have that
Right.
sheet, that's easy to do.
Thank you.
Like,
Yep.
yeah, to try to understand, are we an eighth done?
Absolutely.
Or
Yeah, percent complete,
three-quarters
you could
done?
throw in
Right, yeah.
time and percent complete
Yeah.
or something.
I don't
It's
think
an
we'd hold
important
you, but
process.
yeah, to try to
Yeah.
understand, right,
Yeah.
is it 2 hours or 200 hours?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Right, there's a big difference there.
yes. Approximately.
Agreed. Any other questions on the MSBA process and timelines or anything like that? Not seeing any, all right, then, moving on, to our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction and Assessment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a brief update about our Year 2-3 mentoring program. We had 58 staff members participate. We just wrapped up our final walkthroughs. We had 5 different dates between Ashland, Mendon, Upton, and here. All 58 members participated in one of those dates. So we split up 5 ways so we could lower the stress on the subs that we would need. So no more than 10 to 15 people out in the district and any one of those dates. We talked about our portraits of a graduate. We talked about culturally responsive practices. At the beginning of the days, they went out and did 6 or 7 walkthroughs in classrooms, then we came back and discussed what we saw. And then they talked about ideas they wanted to try and reflections from the day. So all in all, I think they were great days for our staff members. But also, I think they're great days for the staff members that have the walkthroughs that come through, because it really shines a light on some of the good things that are happening in our schools. And certainly other districts notice it. One thing that has come up, we've had this long-standing partnership with Ashland, Mendon, Upton, districts that aren't exactly like us. So it might be time to start exploring sort of districts that have like demographics, like Marlboro. There's just not a lot of districts that have programs like this. And other districts have modeled it after what we've done with Ashland and Mendon Upton. So it would take some coordinating with those folks. Moving forward, next year, we have 58 staff members this year in year 2 and 3. This year we have 61 staff members in our first year. So not everybody participates in year 2 and 3, it just depends on where they are in their certification process. So if they need professional licensure, they need to continue on. If they already come to us with the professional license, it's optional for them. So we should have similar amounts of, I think, of staff members that participate next year.
Excellent. Thank you for the update. Any questions, comments? Not seeing any, so again, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Moving on, a report from our Assistant Superintendent for Business and Human Resources.
Yes, I have for the committee's approval this evening 3 warrants in the amount of $612,070.90.
All right, motion to approve the warrant?
Just a quick question.
Sure.
Kathy, I just had a quick question. So
Sure.
I was looking in the warrant, and I don't know if it was only 2, but at least 2 educators had out-of-state travel for a more considerable sum than would be like just a day sub. Is that usually funded through a grant, or where does the funding for
No.
like that come from?
Can you say, was it administrator?
No, it was not.
It was that would be a grant.
Okay, so I just
Yes.
wanted to confirm where the funding came
Yes.
from for that. Okay, thank you.
Motion to approve the warrant. Motion by Brendan, second by John. All in favor? That is unanimous.
The committee has the latest update on our 24 budget, including the budget adjustments from last month. I have brought the FY 25 budget for your approval this evening in terms of the number to move forward to the finance director, and we are at 6.48% after our previous meeting in the amount of $73,828,784. I have indicated all of the reductions to our budget that we have made in addition to the $275,000 that was authorized for administration to go back and do some more work for those additional cuts, which I will bring back once that has been decided. So tonight is really about approving the number for FY 25 to move forward for the finance director.
And if I could just add something before Kathy,
Mhm.
or before you guys ask questions. Next week, we're meeting with the leadership team to kind of look at that 275,000, just for your edification.
Mhm. Excellent. Any questions? Yes,
Side
John?
information.
Oh, not a question. I'm gonna make a motion to bring this budget number forward to the finance director and the finance committee, because the finance committee is the team that presents the annual budget to town meeting. At this number, $73,828,784.
Motion by John, second by Michael. Discussion, any other? Yes.
So Craig, when we were talking about this before, I know you weren't here, but I had a quick question about illustrating. So and I don't know a lot about the program, but one thing I had heard was that there are free components to it and then there are other paid materials. Is it possible to move forward with just the free components, or I guess what is the rationale for needing the $22,000 next year?
The 22,000, right? That's gonna get you the one piece. So yes, you have access to online, right? But you don't have the online access that's that teachers would be able to use. You know what I mean? Like you could maybe print things off, but the online access includes like the slide presentation, all the different components that they would use that the teachers currently are using in our other illustrative math. That's a big piece of it. But then you also have your student workbooks, your teacher textbooks, and all the materials and manipulatives that the teachers currently don't have. So I think that would be good for a pilot, but if we're gonna go full scale and we want it to be successful, then I think we gotta purchase these things.
I'm wondering if the grades were not purchasing, just as a consideration, if they want to look into the free materials for next year, so that, I know like geometry, algebra,
Yeah.
we're going to do, so just this is a thought.
All right, I'll talk to Carrie about it, and I'm sure that that's gonna be in her plans, because I think her plan was to roll it out to everybody. So she's currently on maternity leave, so when she comes back, we'll talk. Thank you.
Matt?
Just want to ask, you said that the meetings with the building principals over this $275,000 additional hasn't happened yet?
No, we've done the other cuts. We're gonna make that meeting next week.
Okay. I guess I'm struggling with having confidence in this being completed and voted on tonight if the discussion hasn't yet been had to cut the extra $275,000. What that's going to be? How do you know that you can get $275,000 down if you guys haven't even talked about it yet?
I think we're gonna just do it.
Doesn't-
I think
He's sharpening his axe.
Doesn't this come to the director if we kind of gave at the last meeting that it's, the administration's gonna figure out how to make that cut?
It does, but I was under the expectation that those discussions were going to happen before they asked us to vote on the additional cut, that they were going to tell us what exactly they were taking out, and not just saying, well, we'll take out. It almost feels to me like an extra 275 was written into this with the expectation of we'll talk about it later, and it's been 2
no,
weeks.
there'll be budget cuts.
No, it's cut. I mean, the
Yeah, we have to
275's
cut the
cut.
number.
It's where they're gonna cut it from. I mean, this is where last meeting, I think I advocated that we don't wanna get into the operations too deep, let them figure out where they're cutting, this is the number we can afford. That's the meeting that Al was here at, that 6 o'clock meeting.
Yeah, no, and I remember that discussion. I'm curious. We've discussed everything down to $22,000 for math books, and now we don't care what the 275 is.
I wouldn't say we don't care.
Well, okay, you're right. That's not
You're
quite the right
You
term.
want the specifics.
Yeah, I would like
Yeah.
to know. I guess at the end of the day, when you guys are done with that, is that you're going to share?
Yeah, we'll
to
share,
us
well,
what-
100%.
What's been
Yeah,
removed?
yeah,
Okay.
100%. We'll share.
I'm just looking at it like, we gotta bring something forward to the
We do.
finance committee,
We do.
and they may need more time. I don't know if we need to do it tonight, but we wanna bring this number forward tonight, and they might need some more time to figure out how they're gonna get to that number.
I agree. And
So I'm
then
not
my only-
disagreeing with you, I'm just.
No, I know, and it's I've been thinking about this, since the last meeting, because we did give that directive, and that obviously is, we're not sitting here counting all the dollars. It's not our job. But at the same time, we've discussed so much of this stuff in depth, all the way down to almost a low 5 figures, and we haven't discussed the biggest number on the cuts yet. But I would agree.
And it's not gonna
something has to
it's not
happen.
gonna come from one spot, it'll probably be a lot of like,
Right.
a few thousand here, a few thousand there.
Yeah, and then I would say, Kathy, my only other worry, and I guess it's just a worry, but it really doesn't impact any vote decisions tonight, is given the state of transportation and the rollovers and adjustments we've had to make for the last multiple years, taking another 275 out is increasing our likelihood that we're going back to finance committee next year asking for additional money to cover a gap. Is that not a greater possibility with getting
Well,
further down?
I would like to say that in 20 years, I have never done that, and I wouldn't recommend doing that because the town counts on us to manage our budget and our number accordingly. So my hope would be that the increase that we're giving transportation, unless there's another large or an uptick in enrollment that's requiring that sped non-local, I think you should be okay,
Okay.
barring no new initiatives that happen that are outside what we're planning for.
Can I just layer onto that though? I mean, I'm also sensitive to, we took $500K out of school
Yes, we
choice.
did.
So like, that was our buffer. I want to be clear that that's gone.
The
Right.
school
So-
choice buffer will not live again for about 3 years.
So I just want to make sure we're all aligned.
And the other
Yeah.
part of my worry is I've heard, I think you said it last budget meeting, Kevin, that when we get down to this number, we're flying without a safety net. We've been using a
And
safety net
experience.
the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And experience.
Yeah, no,
And
I
experience in
would
creating
say
a safety net. Yeah.
This budget is very, very, it's probably the tightest budget in the 11 years that I've been here, and
Okay.
Kathy, you might even go further back on that.
Yeah, no, the year that everybody took a 0% was very tight.
So it's probably like
Yeah.
not too far from
2010.
that.
2010, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, ultimately, as John said, it's the task of central office, and if you feel confidence that what we're putting forward is manageable, and our next finance person hopefully will be able to pick up right where you left off, then
And I agree with you, Matt. I don't want this 275 not to be concrete. It has to be concrete. It just can't be, we'll take it from here and hope for the best.
Right, and-
It has to be a real budget cut.
yeah, and that's what I don't
and we'll
want it to turn
itemize that
into
out,
a-
we'll itemize that
Yeah.
out for you
I don't want
too.
to turn into a shell thing. It's like, well, we removed it from technology over here, but now technology's behind by 275,000. So this has to come from over here, but now transportation's short. And now it's just meeting after meeting of just sliding money around to try to cover
Yeah.
all of this for the exercise where we may end up needing it back anyway.
So, can I say two things on this?
Go ahead.
One is, I don't relish any of this. You know,
Sure.
I loved our initial budget where we were adding 30 positions, and I felt like we were, I think we were just continuing to progress forward and really meeting the needs. And unfortunately, we've talked about this at length, the Chapter 70 money didn't come in where we thought. There was a couple other factors that kind of played into it. So I don't relish any of this. I want to be very clear on that. Like, I preferred our initial budget, and I think, the committee was very supportive when we had that meeting in December. It ended up being an academic exercise, though, unfortunately. Two, I agree with what you're saying, Matt and Meg. We're going between two buildings now where we've always had multiple nets to cover us, and, it's gonna be really, really, really tight. And we're gonna have to really watch everything from start to finish, and, we're not gonna have, some of the leeway. And there could be some circumstances that arise that we may have to have conversations. If, like Kathy was saying, like there's been a few things over the last couple of years that because we've had those safety nets in place, we've been able to manage the budget effectively. Without that, if we have like a significant event that occurs that impacts the budget, it could be more problematic than it has in the past decade or so.
Brendan?
Are there any line items in the budget that we would initially start off the year with as frozen to wait for things to settle a little bit, to get a better idea of what the numbers are in students, things of that nature, where we'd freeze that budget and then release those funds as needed or as expected once we have a better footing? Obviously, the unexpected is.
I think we're looking at everything. I
Okay.
think we're looking at, like, what are we doing? How are we approaching different problems? How can we approach those issues maybe potentially differently? And I think we're looking at just, it's gonna go down to the individual line items, and it's everything from, how are we approaching professional development? How are we looking at substitutes? How are we looking at, some of the other things that, and it's nothing, things aren't just coming to mind, but those are a few things just off the top of my head, but what are we doing? Which things can we kind of defer, maybe a year, either programmatically or, those types of things. So I think it's gonna be a pretty, down to the line item kind of discussion. And I think we're gonna just, like we have in the past, itemize everything and say, like, these are the things where we, equaling that 275.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Are department heads, Kathy, provided on a regular basis the budget to actual? Because some of Jim's answers surprised me tonight.
All right, so,
Does that question make sense? So like on a monthly basis,
Yes.
for my department that I'm responsible for, I get, here's your budget, here's your actual spend, here's your commitment, here's your encumbered.
it's my understanding everybody gets a copy of the school committee agenda
So they don't per se
from
get a
Melissa.
Okay, so I would just think that we may want to talk about what we want to do, starting with this very new tight budget schedule to create visibility.
In addition to that, I want to clarify.
Okay.
Every building secretary has the ability for each one of the directors and principals to print out their monthly financial from the accounting software. And to the point where if there is one of their line items that has gone into a deficit, they are required to make up their deficit with a particular form, balancing their budget within their own department.
Thank you. Is that a regulation or is that a Milford documented procedure?
It's a Milford not documented,
Okay, so
undocumented
Okay, so
procedure.
I think that's something we should talk about. Go ahead, Ryan.
I'm a little concerned. So, the principals, who, obviously, you and Kathy kind of own the budget. Well, we own all the budget in this room. What do the principals own? Like, do you guys sit with the principals monthly, quarterly, and say, here's where we're at for your building?
So to Kathy's point, they have line items that are, constantly moving based on expenditures.
Totally get it, but who sits down with them and goes through and says, here's where we're at and here's where we're going?
Their building secretaries meet with them.
Yeah. But who in the chain of command? Like,
I don't feel the need to have to meet with the building principal and discuss their budget on their financial statement on a monthly basis.
quarterly? Like, is there like, huh?
What'll happen though is, like, if
Is it-
somebody makes a request that goes outside of it, Kathy will say, hey, you can't, we
Yes.
can't fulfill that because that line, you'd be exceeding that line.
Okay, no, I'm trying to
You
understand,
gotta
like,
remember, each building principal discretionary funds is probably
It's pretty limited.
10 lines. It's not
Okay,
this exact, no,
so-
it's, library supplies,
okay, so
instructional supplies, textbooks.
so really
Very
it's
small.
the central office is looking at the whole budget,
Correct.
and then how often do you guys meet to see, or are you just doing
I
this
look
every
at
day?
that on a continuous basis.
And we talk
and if-
regularly if there's an issue in a particular area,
Yeah,
like,
and if I have any concerns, I send out emails directly to the building principal.
Okay,
and 80% of the budget's personnel, so we're really talking about 20, and then of that, there's a very small portion that's discretionary.
yeah, I'm just trying to understand, obviously from a private or commercial business is
And every
different.
order is approved by me, every purchase order, as the procurement officer.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I was just gonna ask, isn't it kind of the onus of the department head or the principal to track their own budget? I mean, I work for the town, I have a very minuscule budget, but I see where it is every month, and I know where I am, and if there was ever a problem, and there hasn't been, knock on wood, I'd escalate it and say, we have a problem. I mean, if a building has too many substitutes and they're over budget on something, I mean, wouldn't they be watching it?
Correct.
I mean, it's yes, you can oversee it, but you don't have direct oversight of the building principal. And yeah, you could bring it to the superintendent, and he could go back to the building principal, whomever, or even within that building, I don't know, whatever else the expenditures are, but it seems like there just needs to be inherent accountability on.
Correct.
Hey,
on
John,
these
does the town
matters.
administrator sit with you every so often and go through your budget, or do you just watch it yourself?
I'll watch it myself.
Okay.
I just want to be very clear, right? 20% of our budget is almost $15 million. So that's a large number that we no longer have essentially any buffer around. And so any tribal knowledge, I think we have a very big risk that something gets tripped up next year. And so I want us to be accountable to what we're going to do to ensure that those things are either written down, communicated, shared, that we have a plan in place to ensure that we're in a good place. As we approve this, just sharing my concern.
And can I throw one more thing out? 'Cause I'm sorry.
Yeah, go
somebody
ahead,
said their hand
and
up.
Brendan.
No, I'm good.
Okay, yeah.
So the other issue, or the other kind of broad trend that's happening is this is happening all across the state. Like with the discussion we're having right here is happening everywhere. And I would say and I've said this all along, we have a budget challenge. Other places are in crisis. Like
Totally
we're not cutting, lots of personnel, we're not cutting lots of programming. We're gonna be right at the margins, but we're not like in a situation where, we're getting rid of electives at the middle and high school. We're not cutting extracurricular activities. We're not, cutting personnel in a building by 20%, which are things that are happening in places all across the state.
If we weren't simultaneously eliminating the revolver, Kevin, I wouldn't be as concerned as
No,
I am.
I completely hear what
Okay.
you're saying. I like
Okay.
it. Like, your concern is my concern.
Okay.
I can say that with 100%
Thank
certainty.
you. Okay.
But I also want to put it in perspective.
Totally fair.
This is more of a statement, but what Meg's saying, I'm going to say culture is what we tolerate, right? So how are we driving financial discipline into the districts? So what I'm hearing is, and we can talk about it later, you and Kevin are watching the budget, but how do we create a sense of ownership to the district? Even if you have a minuscule budget like John does, he has a sense of ownership for his little budget.
Well, the ownership sits with the person who replaces me and their culture and what they have for expectations.
Okay.
So my expectations, I think, have worked because we've never been in a situation where, at the end of the year, we're asking for more money. But at the end of the day, Michael, the building principals already have that culture set where they're looking at their budget and they know that if they're in the red, they have to balance that budget for the business manager. So that culture is already established.
So
I don't
that-
see that going away.
Okay, so they know if I don't balance my budget, I'm going to get a talking from Kathy.
Correct.
Okay.
Nor, on the opposite side of that coin, would I see surplus funds in any one of those building principals lines and expect that I can take that to balance something that might be in a deficit in another building. I wouldn't do that. That money sits within that building.
Okay.
Now, come May, that might be a different discussion.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I like the point that you bring about accountability. On the town side, if I overspend, I'm on the hook personally. Personally, literally, by the law, I have to take ownership of that money. So that's never going to be the case in the school. But the point of accountability is well taken.
I think one thing that I'd add, and don't take this personally, but yeah, the state's having issues, but I don't care about the rest of the state. I only care about Milford, right? Like, and I just want to say that publicly. Like,
Yeah.
who cares? Like, I don't care what's going on in Hopkinton, Marlboro, or anybody else. I care about Milford, and I want to make sure that our budget reflects the student need, right? And it's kind of getting up on the soapbox a little bit, but I just want to be very clear on that. The directive came back for the $275,000, reduction, to get to that 6.5, and we still need to know how we're going to get there. So there's still some gray areas, some fog going on. I think to Megan's point too, we're losing that safety net of the $500,000. So saying it publicly, like to FinCom, if there's a little bit of money to come back, that might be something that might be the first thing we put in is the safety net. So we've gone back through and we chipped away to get to the 6.5. But to your point about we don't know what's going on with transportation, to get that $500,000 back as a safety net might be one of the first things, me personally saying that. So again, just bringing that up, I think we're doing a great job for our Milford students, and I think that's, we're focused on that. So, yes.
When's Nancy's last day?
Middle of July.
So when's the transition and training going to happen between?
I think they've already started.
Already
talking.
started.
What role are
Okay.
you talking about, Michael?
Yeah.
Grants.
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 Thank you.
I'm just thinking like, okay,
You went off on a tangent there.
sorry, my mind was going. I was going through, and I'm like, wait a minute.
The
You know,
name.
Shocking.
yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
So-
Nancy writes
alright.
them, she doesn't necessarily, she's not the grant liaison when it comes to, managing the grants. She writes and receives the grant.
I just want to make sure that we don't lose the momentum that we've built and
Okay,
continue.
so you want the grant writer to continue on.
Is there a safety net grant she can find?
Exactly.
That tends not to be there.
No, that's not
Yeah.
it.
Like
Oh, okay.
$400,000 to fill in your school choice account is not really a grant we've
Yeah,
seen
wish,
to this-
right?
to date.
It's worth a shot.
Well, the
So-
question was on the listserv, what's the average, what are districts getting from their towns for their budgets for FY '25? And the average was 5%, so we're again above average,
Mhm.
which is good to know.
We love to be above average.
We love to be above average.
All right. Ultimately, so I think we all started with John had made the motion and Michael had second. Any more discussion?
I'm not sure what agenda item we're on anymore.
What's that?
Nothing.
You don't remember what you did? Yeah.
Oh, you didn't get it.
Yeah, okay.
All right, motion second, and then all in favor. And that is unanimous.
Marvelous.
All right. So, moving on from the FY '25 budget. What do we got next?
Oh, and we have a list of the latest appointments from our latest meeting, no vote is required. And I do not believe, do we have grants or gifts tonight, Chris?
I don't
think
have
so.
anything in front of me, so
No.
I'm going with, no, what's that?
There's a grant in the packet. Highlighted.
The packet has a little list.
Oh, I forget it's in the packet now.
Is it,
Yeah.
well, usually she hands it to me, but
Page
it's just the
two.
one?
Oh, no.
I
Okay,
know,
yeah,
it's
I'm
this
on it.
one
All
at the
right, so
bottom.
it's just the one
Is there-
for March
Oh, there it is.
2024 for this
Is that the one?
14,375.
social emotional learning, mental
Yes.
health continuation for $14,375. Is that what I'm looking at?
That's what I
All
said.
right, so, yeah, motion?
Accept it.
Yep. Motion by Michael, second by Robin. And then, discussion? Not seeing any, and then all in favor then. And that is unanimous. Excellent. All right. And then no gifts, so excellent. All right, subcommittee updates. Yes,
So I'll do the policy update. So policy met earlier tonight, and we started reviewing different policies related to the use of school facilities.
excellent, thank you for that. Any other policies? Yes.
Just real quick, somewhat of a subcommittee, the website group met on Monday.
Yeah, Monday.
Some point
Monday
this week we met.
Yep.
Progress is happening. Melissa Bullock's been working incredibly hard to basically be our web designer to migrate everything over to the new platform, and there's more work to be done. Tim Kernan did mention that he was going to be getting involved as well as the future tech director to work with Nancy and Melissa to kind of fine-tune things, but they're making progress, and I wouldn't say that there's an expected deadline to have it finished. I think the ultimate goal is to get it buttoned up and good from the beginning before we let it go. So more work to be done.
Good, thank you for that. Anything else subcommittee-wise? All right, future agenda items. Anything on future agenda? Brendan?
I'd like to establish timelines for the agreed upon motions for the recommendations from the audit.
Okay. All right, excellent. Yep.
So I know we talked about this earlier with transportation, but bringing in various stakeholders that can give us information, like
Shoot.
Macy's, Aid,
Yeah.
DeSoto, about both local and non-local transportation
Mhm.
costs for next year.
All right, can do that.
Can I just
Yeah.
modify that a little bit if you're comfortable, Robin, to really be, like, to bring us the analysis with the data that they've done so that we can discuss that versus a preliminary discussion? It'd be helpful to us if they could kind of do the work and then come, that would be awesome.
If I could comment, yeah, I think our plan would be to have a preliminary meeting or two before we brought anything to the school committee.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'd prefer you do the work and then come so we
Yes,
can have a
absolutely.
discussion for sure.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, okay. Michael?
I know Jim mentioned it, but the discussion about the school committee use director and the transportation director, if we should start to split that.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. All right.
Just a question, I guess. I mean, how do we just, maybe rephrasing Brandon's thing, I don't know that we set a timeline. I think we just have to put each of these items on the agenda. I mean, we don't know how long it's gonna take until we
Sure.
get into it. So let's just make them
That's-
agenda
yeah.
items, either individually or
Yeah, I just wanna
collectively.
make sure that it's not
Like,
just
I don't
a-
wanna say, yeah, we're gonna do this in 2 weeks, and we don't
No, no,
realize
no.
how long it's
Right.
gonna take to accomplish something, that's all.
For sure.
I think we're on the same page, maybe
Yeah,
just
yeah.
phrasing it different.
It's more, just more discussion regarding that, okay. Megan?
Okay, sorry. So Kathy, I apologize. I had thought that this was what I was getting with the initial transportation data asked from Jim, but clearly it wasn't based upon the discussion tonight. So at the next meeting, can we get an update? Can we get a summary of the original versus final budget for the last 5 years with actual spend?
Sure.
Just clear,
Sure,
last
sure.
5 years, this is the original, this is where we ended, this is what we spent. I just wanna have that data
So you
available.
want budget adjustments
Yes,
included in
yes,
a column?
that,
Okay.
I was, yes, thank you. I wasn't
Okay.
explicit in that, so that would be fantastic, thank you. And then in conjunction with Brendan's ask, Chris, on the sort of timeline for the audit recommendations,
Mhm.
could we also get a list of existing procedural documentation as well as documentation we think we need to sort of fill the gap of any tribal knowledge, just to make sure everyone's aligned with what is actually on paper and what maybe should be on paper? So I don't think that's a specific recommendation in here, Kathy, but in thinking about the transition, just so we all understand this is
Sure.
today documented, this is not, because the fiscal management policies don't address POs per se. If it's not on
Right.
paper, we just should know that, and so we can figure out
That's
what we
true.
wanna have. And then Kevin, just for future MSBA updates, if they could be just modified with approximate time investment to complete and approximate percent complete, a range is totally fine. As well as the detail on the 275K budget cut.
Mhm.
And I can send
Yes.
all these to you. And then
Yeah.
Craig, I just wasn't sure on the timing for the equity audit. When were we expecting to hear back from them?
We have a meeting either next week or soon,
Okay,
and they're gonna talk about the
preliminary.
preliminaries.
Okay, thanks. So don't add that for now, Chris. Thanks.
Okay, not a problem. All right. Anything else? No, you sure? You were,
No.
you,
I was just trying to mess with you. No.
yeah, I figured, yeah. I'm a seasoned veteran up here. So, all right, anything else? All right, moving on to chairperson update.
There you go. Thank you. That inclusive. Just-
I get, quickly, it was brought up Tuesday night, Parks Department presented their preliminary plans, for Town Park. There was a mention of whether or not to put a roadway around Memorial. So again, very preliminary. First I even heard of it. I didn't engage in the conversation aspect just because I felt a little odd from my planning board side and school committee side. But I think it might be something that we might have to talk about a little bit more. I don't know, the planning to the budget to who would get involved. So again, just want to bring that up a little bit it was discussed, but I don't know where it's going yet. And I haven't even followed up on anything, but again, so.
Just quickly, I just wanted to support what you're saying there, because for those who maybe weren't at the town meeting when this project kicked off, there was a discussion pretty clearly from the Parks Department that they wanted to widen all of the walking paths to a vehicle width already
Right.
in order to be able to get their stuff down there without destroying everything. I don't know if that's still in the plan, but if that is, I think that maybe this becomes a discussion with maybe the facilities subcommittee to start.
Right.
Because if they're already doing that, one of the walking paths goes from uphill from Memorial down towards the back parking lot already. It's possible that you could
Right.
just reroute the way things go.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Obviously, it needs to be a little wider than barely wide enough.
And they are, yeah, so all their pathways as proposed would be 8 feet wide to be able to support their vehicles. So again, the preliminary plans that were presented did not have any type of pathways to that one side of Memorial, so, yeah, Michael.
So,
Do we have somebody from the administration working with the parks to?
I have talked to Mr. Asman about it, but that was in the fall.
Yeah.
It's all preliminary.
Yeah,
So I've had conversations with Lisa Burns and Scott Crisafulli on the highway side, not so much the park side, going back 8-9 years about the problems at Memorial. And so I think this is something that our subcommittee should engage with the Parks Commission to explore. And this is one of the unique pieces of property in town where typically we know that, parklands are owned or controlled by Parks Department, school properties by school department, being this facility and others. That's the unique property that the school and the town park is all on one piece of property, so it's almost like dual jurisdiction or who has it. And I've talked to town council about this, so it's really an odd ownership, but regardless of that, I think we can work together
oh, definitely.
and see what works best for the community as a whole.
Yeah, it's definitely a longer conversation.
Yeah.
But again, I just want to bring it up because, again, it was brought up on Tuesday night and a little bit new to me, so. just so no one else was surprised by that. And then the last update is just want to say thank you, everybody. It's been a great couple of years up at this seat. I appreciate everybody's support. I appreciate my Friday morning grades from a particular member that I get when I first got into the seat. So who would always give me updates of how to be a better chairperson. So again, I'm assuming on.
You have to watch the meeting first to let you know.
Yes.
Whoa!
Yep.
Just got it.
Hey, this is my update.
Hey, last year's a tough year.
What a launch.
So, but again, I'm assuming we'll be reorganizing at our next meeting. 2 years at this seat has been a pleasure, but it also has been a lot of work. So, but I appreciate everybody's support to me, especially John. Leaned on John a lot, especially since he's down at town hall. I could kind of ask him to ask somebody else some questions and get information. So it's always been good. I appreciate working with the administration team too. Always a pleasure working and communicating and being up here to kind of set agendas forward and again continuing to move this district forward. So again, appreciate everybody's support and thank you. So with that, I will.
Well, I'd just like to add to that, Chris. You've done a phenomenal job in the 2 years as chairperson, and in your 6 years here on the committee so far. And I had the pleasure of serving as Megan's vice chair. You guys have brought great leadership to this committee, and you've represented the committee as a whole, which is the role of the chairperson. So I commend you highly, and Megan as well. People I had the pleasure of serving as vice chair under, and just looking forward for more good efforts towards Milford.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you. All right, looking for a motion to adjourn. Motion by Michael, second by Megan. All in favor? And that is unanimous. All right, thank you, everybody. Good night.